Whichever of your knights is boldest of blood and wildest of hearts, step forth. Take up arms, and try with honor to land a blow against me. Should he land a blow, he must seek me out yonder, to the Green Chapel, 6 knights to the north. He shall find me there and bend a knee and let me strike him in return. Be it a scratch on the cheek or a cut in the throat, I will return what was given to me. 1 year.
Instead of a more typical Arthurian legend of bravery and boldness, The Green Knight is a story of vulnerability and insignificance. Gawain spends much of this movie totally paralyzed by confusion and fear. The plot is mysterious and inscrutable. It feels like there's some sort of bigger conspiracy that Gawain never even begins to interrogate. For example, good luck trying to figure out why Gawain's mother created the Green Knight in the first place. Did she somehow know Gawain was going to be the only one to volunteer, or was that an unexpected development that she just rolls with? Is she trying to help Gawain grow to become a better person, or is she trying to position him to be more likely to inherit political power? Before he goes, she gives him an enchanted sash, which is supposed to shield him from harm. And at the end, when Gawain takes off the sash, is he defying his mother or passing her test? And what am I supposed to make of the last line of the movie?
Off with your head.
Is he still going to kill him, or was that just a joke? Or is it also a message about letting go of your left-brained ego, about trusting your heart instead of your head? Or is he talking to me and telling me not to overthink this? Welcome to Acolytes of Horror, where we examine the horrors of life through the horrors of film. My name is Nathan, and tonight I'm scared of David Lowery's The Green Knight, which is based on a medieval poem that we're not really going to talk about today, because I feel like every YouTube video that does The Green Knight makes those comparisons, so I'm going to be a little more interested in how The Green Knight complicates and interrogates our present-day expectations of what a big-budget fantasy movie should be. Specifically, how it tangles up honor and manhood into this uncanny maze of ambiguity. Now, some of the points I make here also will apply to the poem, and some of them maybe not so much. Dissect all that in the comments. Where to begin with this movie? I feel like people watch video essays like this because they want to feel closer to something that they really enjoyed, but when I was listing all those plot questions earlier, I hope it reminded you of just how hard this movie works to keep the audience at an arm's length. You might have some really strong feelings about what you want some of the answers to be, but the text itself uses these questions only as a way to unsettle us, to make Gawain feel like a small, insignificant piece of a puzzle that he and we will never see. Which is kind of an unusual approach to fantasy, right? The fantasy genre, especially big-budget fantasy movies, are usually about empowerment, especially fantasy stories that revolve around a hero embarking on a mythical quest. Character growth is defined by a steady progression of power, or at least an increasing familiarity with the fantasy world's geography and culture. By the end of most of these narratives, all the big mysteries have been solved and conquered. In this way, fantasy often makes the unfamiliar familiar. Take Star Wars, for example, a fantasy story which uses the aesthetics of science fiction. Notice how it reduces the unfathomable vastness of outer space down to a fully mapped out interstate. Spaceships are basically cars that just about everyone seems to know how to pilot. The aliens look weird, but they all perform social roles that anyone can immediately contextualize. Mobster, teacher, fascist, slaves. With each movie, Luke levels up. And when he leveled down in The Last Jedi, a lot of people lost their fucking minds. It bothered me too initially, but don't worry, that's all I'm going to say about The Last Jedi. I'm just trying to make the point that epic fantasy stories very rarely focus on stories of weakness and insignificance. The main characters of Star Wars are literally
the most important people in the galaxy.
And we see that motif of importance everywhere in fantasy. So many fantasy heroes wind up being the rightful heir to a throne or some prophesied chosen one. But the Green Knight feels like it's in direct conversation with these tropes. The story begins with a creepy whispered voiceover telling us of King Arthur's heroic deeds. But then it makes a point to say,
"But this is not that king, nor is this his son."
Gawain is not the most important person in the world, nor is he saving the world. He never defeats an enemy or saves a friend. He gets noticeably weaker the longer his journey goes on. His quest feels less like a tale of heroism than it does an exploration of his own foggy subconsciousness, an ambiguous plunge into the uncanny. Uncanny is a word that I keep coming back to with this movie. It's a word that was popularized by the big man himself, Sigmund Freud, who
wrote that
the uncanny is that class of the terrifying, which leads back to something long known to us, once very familiar.
If fantasy usually makes the unfamiliar familiar, the uncanny makes the familiar unfamiliar. It's an aesthetic that's more commonly used in horror. Instead of jumping out at characters from the dark, the uncanny is often something that just stands right out in the open. Something whose very existence seems to hint at sinister forces that we can't quite articulate. Characters don't really run from the uncanny so much as become paralyzed by it. It makes us feel small, stupid, and alone, as if we don't really understand how our own world works. Probably the most uncanny part in The Green Knight is the long sequence in the castle where everyone seems to be a doppelganger of other characters, but this is never commented on. Gawain never really has any agency while he's at the castle either. He just freezes up and acts like everything is fine as he's confronted by strange thing after strange thing after strange thing. It all feels more like a dream that he can't wake up from. Freud links the uncanny to feelings of repression and, of course, fear of castration, because with Freud, everything had to be about penises and vaginas. But, you know, maybe he's onto something here, at least as far as The Green Knight goes, because I feel like the familiar concept that this movie makes unfamiliar, the repressed fears that refuse to be uncovered, are the question of what makes a great man. It's a coming-of-age story about a boy who wants to become a man who has no idea what a man is supposed to be. The romantic legends that surround knighthood feel more like a story that knights tell themselves about themselves. Arthur's Round Table looks like a place you'd fight a Dark Souls boss. The second shot of the movie depicts a Camelot that is on fire. His kingdom is full of death and destruction, but Arthur tells us that everything is going great.
This morn I looked, and I saw land shaped by your hand.
Gawain is asked several times why he's going on this suicidal quest, and he never really has a good answer.
Are you really going to go?
Should I?
What do you hope to gain from facing all of this?
Honor.
Are you asking me?
He knows he needs to change, but he doesn't know what he's supposed to grow out of or into. This guy is risking his life to get to a chapel where he will have to put his head under a strange creature's axe. And he doesn't even know why.
Is this really all there is?
Something I love about the casting of Dev Patel in this is that he is almost too old for this part. It really feels like he should know who he is by now, so it gives Gawain's restlessness a sense of urgency.
You a knight yet?
What?
You a knight yet?
Not yet.
Better hurry up.
I've got time. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready.
You feel for him. It can't be easy growing up in the shadow of the manliest character in Camelot. His uncle, the great King Arthur.
The most important man in the kingdom.
Truly a hegemonic man's man, if ever there was one. A warrior and a conqueror whose magical, unbeatable phallus marks him as God's hand-picked hero. And I think his portrayal in this adaptation is unique in how fragile he feels.
My tooth hurts.
If Dev Patel is too old, Sean Harris is probably a bit young to be playing a man whose age has drained him to this extreme. It gives the impression that Arthur has lived a very hard life that has taken a lot out of him. Sean Harris weighs down his body and voice with this melancholic heaviness. He's downright ghostly, and for a character who pretty perfectly fits the fantasy archetype of the mentor whose guidance sets the hero on his journey, Arthur's advice to Gawain is so vague.
I do not know of any man who has not marched up to great death before his time. Is it wrong to want greatness for you?
Go be great. Somehow. Good luck. Like, you could argue that Gawain's whole predicament is kind of Arthur's fault. Like, I don't think he would have bothered to fight the Green Knight in the first place if moments before Arthur wasn't like, tell me a story about your adventures.
Tell me a tale of yourself, so that I might know thee.
I have none to tell, King.
Again and again, the Green Knight creates this uncanny tension between the myth of manhood versus the reality of it. When Gawain and the scavenger walk through this tragic battlefield full of decaying corpses, some of whom are the scavenger's brothers, he talks about the violence as if it were a fairy tale.
Though I'd lasted longer, they say the king, he killed 960, all on his lonesome. Now, if it was me, I'd have stayed upright long enough to take my shot.
Saint Winifred can't tell the difference between Gawain, the knight offering to chivalrously retrieve her head from the bottom of the lake, and the man who murdered her for not letting him rape her.
Lord came seeking shelter like thee. Perhaps he was thee. Was he?
No.
You certain?
The movie never directly comments on these discrepancies. They are presented only as an ambiguous, uncanny feeling. This feeling that... Like any Arthurian tale, Gawain's manhood is defined by the attainment of honor.
In this world, one's worth was defined by one's honor, and this quest is Gawain's chance to prove himself.
In a movie like, say, Excalibur, it's very obvious to us that Arthur is dishonorable when he fights Lancelot to appease his ego.
You, sir, would fight to the death against a knight who is not your enemy. For a stretch of road you could easily ride around.
So be it. To the death.
And there's an immediate consequence for his behavior.
My pride broke it. My rage broke it.
But in The Green Knight, honor feels so much harder to define. Okay, so a lot of writers have made the claim that each of the 5 trials that Gawain endures on his quest represent the 5 knightly virtues that are mentioned in the poem.
In the poem, the 5 points are said to represent the 5 wounds of Christ on the cross, the 5 joys of Mary, as well as the 5 knightly virtues: generosity, courtesy, chastity, fellowship, which is sometimes translated as friendship, and piety.
I'm struck by how few of our contemporary pop culture heroes are defined by all or often any of these qualities. I mean, if I described a character to you who is obsessed with money, rude, sexually active, someone who competes with a friend for a woman and who has no respect for religion, I have just described Han Solo. I mean, hell, these qualities don't really even describe Guy Ritchie's King Arthur. So, if these are the virtues that the Green Knight defines as honor, well, it's never vocalized in the film itself. And if we skip ahead to the end, Gawain removing his enchanted sash really has nothing to do with any of these virtues, except arguably piety. But to go back to the idea of honor being harder to define in this movie, the real point I'm trying to make here is that there's no narrative karma, no external cause and effect like there is in something like Excalibur, beyond like maybe a verbal rebuke. Now, bad and good things do happen to Gawain on his journey, sure, but the why of it all feels totally disconnected from any kind of moral decision he makes. The bandits probably would have robbed him no matter what he did. St. Winifred scolds him for not being courteous, but he still gets his axe back when he helps her. The Lord and Lady express mild disappointment and just let Gawain go on his way, and when Gawain abandons the game, he becomes king. So David Lowery has constructed a world where your honor defines your manhood, but the way Gawain's honor is tested feels shrouded in this confusing haze of the uncanny. His journey feels more like a dreamy parade of his own repressed fears of insignificance. When he fails, it's never really out of cruelty. He never hurts anyone. It's just more like he's confused and helpless. What is honor? What is a great man? And you know, there is something really uncanny about gender itself, isn't there? I mean, my masculinity is, to some extent, a performance. I am performing right now this masculinity that is hopefully coming off as very earnest and curious. You know, a lot of this naturally comes from me, but I'm also very directly, intentionally focusing specific parts of myself that are mimicking other guys on YouTube that I find inspiring. Men like Jacob Geller, the Vlog Brothers, Evan Puchak from The Nerd Writer. Another masculine role model of mine is Philosophy Tube, who wound up being a woman all along. And there's this whole other interesting complication when you think about how my wife Phoebe is always behind the camera when I'm shooting these things, giving me acting notes. So in a way, I'm performing her ideal version of my masculinity. Unless you're trans, you probably haven't thought a whole lot about this, but it can be really hard to know sometimes how much of my gender identity comes from me and how much of it comes from the world around me. When Gawain beheads the Green Knight at the beginning of the movie, he's trying to perform his masculine dominance for a room full of the manliest men in his entire world. When the Green Knight lays down his weapon, Gawain's eyes keep darting away from his opponent to everyone watching him. And when he delivers his killing blow, he speaks not to the knight, but to his audience.
Never forget what happened here upon this Christmas Day.
And after beheading the Green Knight, the first thing he does is look to Arthur for approval. After all, the Green Knight is a direct challenge to Arthur's legacy. His connection to nature and witchcraft implies that he's kind of an ambassador for the pagan cultures that King Arthur has spent his life conquering. The timing is also pretty symbolically charged, seeing as how so much of Christmas is essentially a Christian appropriation of pagan traditions. So Gawain thinks Arthur would enjoy watching him decapitate that challenge, totally missing that the game was a test of the honor that Arthur has built his name on.
You understand this challenge?
I think I do.
When the Green Knight refuses to fight, he is essentially asking, Are your knights as chivalrous as your legends claim? Is this kingdom built on a foundation of violence or character? And this is a test that Gawain obviously fails, and again, he fails because he's trying to be like Arthur. For all of King Arthur's legends of chivalry and honor, Arthur's reputation as a warrior and a conqueror is what has influenced Gawain the most. On some level, Gawain knows that what he did was not honorable, but the Knights of the Round Table, who are presumably the most honorable men in King Arthur's court, react like this. It's easy to shake our heads at these clueless knights, but, so much of our culture, whether it's movies, sports, religion, politics, or war, similarly obsesses over who's going to dominate who, while completely missing or ignoring any larger complexities that complicates that gladiatorial narrative. I mean, even the Green Knight's trailer does this.
Let one of your knights try to land a blow against me. Indulge me in this game.
I will meet thee.
Notice how it makes Gawain out to be so much more awesome in his violence. How the Green Knight is dehumanized into something more monstrous and menacing. The beheading seems more like a justified slip of the sword, as if Gawain just got a little carried away in the middle of a fair fight. The trailer clearly feels the need to tease a much more violent movie than it actually is. The percussion of its editing is punctuated by clanging steel. Everything about the Green Knight's advertising campaign promises that this will be yet another entry in that most lucrative, dominant, and manliest of genres, the action movie. As Broe Deschanel brilliantly observed in her video on Point Break,
action films offer a safe space for men, a low-culture comfort not unlike rom-coms for women, with each one fulfilling a set of familiar cliches. The emotionally detached hero with his unwavering moral code, beaten down until his moment of reckoning, when he realizes he has to fight his way out of unbeatable odds, with nothing but his grit to save him. The unexpected partnership, the grizzled mentor who bites it in the second act, the antagonist who threatens the stability of the social order, but is often actually kind of justified, who our hero must defeat to realign the status quo. Each one of these comfortable tropes, the adrenaline of violence, the thrill of the chase, brings viewers a step closer to that unconscious gratification.
But everything about the Green Knight is designed to wreck that safe space. This is not an action movie, and Gawain himself absolutely cannot fathom that. When the Green Knight bows to him, he mistakes this trusting act of submission for a trick or an emasculating joke.
What is this? A trick?
For surely any test of manhood always has to be a test to see who can dominate who.
Stand up and face me!
Despite the stabby staccato of the trailer, this is the only scene in the movie where Gawain uses a weapon to hurt someone, and it's framed as the stupidest decision of his life. All of the supposedly enchanted weaponry that Gawain gets at the beginning is immediately destroyed and stolen. Gawain's journey is one of vulnerability instead of empowerment. Mankind is consistently ambiguous. The only moments of wonder and awe come from nature, when language falls away and all of Gawain's inadequacies and fears shrink down to a tiny, insignificant blip in an overpowering landscape of green. Nobody dies on camera in The Green Knight, but when things slow down, we're either lingering on images of bodies in various states of decay or on Gawain marching towards his own demise. The Lady of the Castle's Moss monologue underlines this point, which describes Green as an unstoppable force of both creation and destruction, the leaves of life and the rot of death. By the end of it, she's practically seething about how no matter what Gawain does, no matter how important or honorable of a knight he becomes, the green comes for us all in the end. This is the wall that Gawain's quest for empowerment keeps bouncing off of. Whether you complete this game or not, every day you are marching towards your death. You do not matter as much as you think you do. When Gawain finally finds the Green Knight, he chickens out. And then we watch him live out the rest of his life without having learned anything. During this sequence, Gawain gets to live out the masculine power fantasy that the movie's trailer promised. He earns the respect of Arthur and becomes king.
The most important man in the kingdom.
He marries a docile princess who, as far as we ever see, never speaks or emotes or challenges him in any way. But all this power is explicitly linked to an act of cowardice, which symbolically follows him for the rest of his life in the form of his enchanted sash, which he never, ever takes off again. We never see this sash actually protect him. In fact, earlier in the movie, the bandit very easily just cuts it off, but this big, strong king still clings to his mommy's magic blankie. The only thing he's learned from his quest is he never wants to be vulnerable again. Dr. R.W. Connell writes that
our enactments of masculinity and femininity bring a social reality into being.
And in Gawain's possible future, we see that the reality his masculine enactment will bring is every bit as bad as losing his head here and now. Gawain's dystopian future ends horribly, because his idea of honor is something he needs other people to explain to him. An honorable king does not marry prostitutes. An honorable king must make war. Anyone who insults the honor of a king must die. But then we cut back to that moment of truth at the Green Chapel. Dev Patel is just so great in these final seconds, especially compared to how he acted in the beginning. Before, his eyes darted around and he shouted. Now his voice is steady, his eyes clear. What's more interesting to me than geeking out about the knightly virtues is how Gawain spends most of his quest doing what he's told. Gawain isn't generous with the bandit, but when the bandit asks for money, he does give him something. He isn't courteous to St. Winifred, but when she scolds him and asks him to help, he does and everything works out. It wasn't chaste of him to fool around with the lady of the castle, but he does resist until she basically tells him not to.
You want it? Do you want it?
Yes. Gawain transgresses against fellowship by not giving the Lord what he got from the castle, but he does let the Lord kiss him, and his eventual refusal is mild.
Unhand me, and let us go our ways.
And up to this point, he has obeyed every assertion the Lord has urged on him.
Easy now, easy. You must eat.
I will hunt, you shall rest, and we shall both be all the better for it.
I will eat and give thanks and then take my leave.
Nonsense. Here is what will happen. Let us make a promise to each other.
And let's not forget that he wasn't going to go on this quest at all until Arthur told him to.
Was it not just a game?
Perhaps. But it is not complete.
Much like Alex Garland's Annihilation, growth for Gawain comes from moments when he surrenders his ego to nature's vast cosmic power. He escapes being tied up by the bandits only after we see a vision of his death. He nearly drowns when diving for Winifred's skull, and only succeeds after disappearing into an obliterating blast of stars. And at the end, he rejects his vision of social and political empowerment to instead bow before the uncanny and just let himself be vulnerable. There's no more audience to perform for. The game has gone from a legendary story to tell all the lads back home about to a quiet, private victory. The world and everyone in it is still uncanny and unknowable. There's nothing he can do about that. But he can understand himself. In this moment, honor is no longer a word in need of an outside definition. Now, it's a feeling that comes from within.
I'm ready now.
So, that was going to be the end of the script, but it just felt wrong to me. Or maybe not wrong so much as not all the way right, you know? So, I figured, hell, if there's any video where I can get away with having two endings, it's this one. So, alright, what was wrong with that first ending? Well, I kept getting reminded of the first time I saw this movie, and specifically it was the moment where Gawain runs away from the Green Knight. The beginning of the big dystopian fantasy sequence. And when I saw that for the first time, my first reaction was, oh, cool, I get it. This whole movie has been piling all this dread onto this quest for 2 straight hours. We keep being reminded how Gawain has no idea why he's even doing it, and he keeps being punished for living his life by other people's standards. So, of course, the big climactic decision that he makes at the end is for him to say, fuck this game. This game makes no sense. The only reason I'm even doing it is to impress a bunch of men that I don't even know. Like, why should I honor a game that really wasn't even fair to begin with? I can't put my head back on like the Green Knight can, so why should I make myself more vulnerable than he did to me? The game itself is as dishonorable as it is pointless. I haven't really talked about Essel yet. She's a prostitute who is also more than that to Gawain, though he is inconsistent in how he shows it. Before he leaves, she mentions wanting to marry him, and Gawain characteristically freezes up. She's the only character who isn't made murky or mysterious by any sense of uncanny ambiguity. Essel and Gawain are the only characters who are performed with a more naturalistic acting style, while everyone else's performances are a bit heightened, which makes them feel distant from Gawain. The usually ambiguous movie always seems to be on Essel's side. I think she has the wisest line anybody says in this whole story.
This is how silly men perish.
Or how brave men become great.
Why greatness? Why is goodness not enough?
So as I watched Gawain riding his horse back home, I was imagining some scenes where he finally is honest to Essel about caring for her. You know, like, as I saw the axe coming down, I saw your face, and suddenly I knew exactly who I wanted to be and who I didn't want to be. I don't care about being a knight or being great. It's just like you said. Goodness is enough. And then maybe there could be some kind of final conversation or confrontation with Arthur, who at least initially does not understand this at all. Whatever. The point is that it makes sense for Essel to be the way that Gawain demonstrates that he's changed, because out of all the mysterious and distant characters that he meets along his journey, it really feels like the girl he left back home is the one he has the most to learn from. Essel is open and direct about what she wants, while Gawain is repressed and obsessed with the approval of others. His whole troubles began because he was looking to other men for guidance, when really other women are really the only ones who directly tell him when he's doing something wrong.
A knight should know better. You are no knight.
Again, we are never explicitly told his mother's motivations, but there is a case to be made that she felt the need to create a big green man to teach him a lesson because he never listens to her.
Where have you been?
Mass.
All night?
Yes.
Where are you?
So there would be something cool about him coming back and saying, "You were right, Essel. I should have listened to you. This whole thing was stupid." Alright, sorry if you find my fanfiction annoying here. I know it's kind of bad form for a critic to editorialize like this. I'm truly not saying my ending is better. I just want to give a counter example of where it felt like this movie was going before we start banging our heads against the ending that we actually got. Because the movie does pay off these threads of Essel and women influencing Gawain, and it does so in a really creative way. The first time in Gawain's dystopian future that we get a sense that things are going very wrong is when he mistreats Essel, when he explicitly decides not to marry her and pulls his newborn son out of her hands. It's a moment that is shocking not only because it's such an extremely evil escalation of his character, but also because in a weird way it makes sense. We realize that all the weaknesses Gawain has shown on his journey were all red flags for a much darker potential. And when it all falls apart, it is the gaze of women who haunt him the fiercest. In Essel's fury after their son has died, in his mother's disappointment in the vision's final moments, in the photograph behind his throne, which the lady of the castle took earlier in the movie, a portrait which is directly contrasted with the painting Gawain commissioned for himself earlier.
I've had my portrait made already.
Not by me.
The only time Dev Patel's skin color is acknowledged in this movie is in how this portrait conforms to the time period's masculine ideals so desperately that he is painted as a white man. But the lady sees him as he is, lost and swallowed by darkness, a dictator in training. Her use of a camera obscura makes this point even more obvious, showing Gawain and the values he's pursuing as upside down. On a symbolic level, we can understand Gawain bowing before the Green Knight as him bowing before the inevitability of his own death. So by removing that enchanted sash and bowing to the uncanny, he is essentially finally surrendering his ideas of self-importance and trusting fate to do whatever it wants with him. But that's not quite a perfect metaphor, is it? Because unlike something like Annihilation, where she is trapped with the uncanny element and has to submit to it because there's no other choice, Gawain chose this. Step by step, he walked to his own death when he didn't have to. And so the idea that it's honorable for him to bow down and take it like a man begs the question, honorable by whose standards? I'm reminded of the classic book, The Book Thief, in which the character Death writes the following poem.
I've seen so many men over the years who think they're running at other young men. They're not. They're running at me.
In this poem, Death makes a distinction between bowing to death when it comes and running right at it. A distinction that this movie seems to understand until this ending. I said earlier that Gawain taking off the sash is a private moment of honor compared to the Green Knight's beheading, which was a public performance, but Gawain is still performing for the Green Knight.
Well done, my brave knight.
On top of this, the Green Knight doesn't only symbolize death, he's also coded as very masculine. On one hand, he's the largest and strongest character in the movie. He has the loudest and deepest voice, and he shows the least emotion. But on the other hand, he is sort of the puppet of a group of women. During his first big scene, most of his dialogue is shown to be coming from a letter written by Gawain's mother, and he speaks through the lips of Queen Guinevere. There's something cool about that. It fits in nicely with the movie's motif of women knowing more about what makes a good man than most men, because when men are bad, women are often the ones who suffer the most. But at the end, the fluidity of the Green Knight's gender goes away. We don't see his mother pulling the strings anymore, we just see the masculine part. In fact, it doubles down on the Green Knight's masculinity. When Gawain is waiting for the Green Knight to awaken, the Green Knight's face is briefly replaced with King Arthur's. When the Green Knight says, "Well done, my brave knight," at the end, it really feels like a father praising his child. It's his most human moment, and if women are still controlling him at this point, we no longer see it. Instead of Gawain acquiring some new conception of honor, it feels a bit like he finally got what he wanted right from the beginning. A father figure's approval. And even if we go along with the suggestion that submitting to the Green Knight is honorable, just 30 minutes before this, we had a scene where the Lord of the Castle openly mocks the idea that one honorable deed makes an honorable man.
This is all it takes. You do this one thing. You return home a changed man, an honorable man. Just like that.
So even if we think that Gawain ultimately survives the game, if we agree with the philosophies of these three characters, Gawain's fate remains ambiguous right to the end. If we look at the Green Knight through the lens of gender, as the movie seems to want us to do until this ending, Gawain has successfully conformed to what Daddy Green Knight wanted him to do. And then the movie just immediately ends before we're told how to feel about any of it. It devotes 15 minutes to showing us all the ways that Gawain might become a bad man, and 1 minute on him doing one apparently honorable thing. Manhood still feels uncanny. The familiar still feels unfamiliar. Maybe that's the best we can expect from a horror movie. Hey, thanks for checking out my work, everybody. If you like more Green Knight gender analysis, Kaz Rowe has one called A Look at Queerness in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which is a bit more critical of the film than mine, but they really know their stuff, and their writing is so engaging, and the performance is really fun. I highly recommend it. By the way, I also have some footnotes in the comments about some thoughts I didn't know where to fit into the main essay, particularly the question of whether Gawain is seduced or assaulted by the lady and lord of the castle. Yeah, this really wound up being a difficult movie to write about because there's so much of it that feels like a Rorschach test, you know? So it took a long time, a lot of effort. If you'd like to support what I do, I make a bonus video for my Patreon supporters every month. Thank you, patrons, by the way. I recently talked about the Suspiria movies and The Strangers, and I think pretty soon I'll be chatting about David Lowery's A Ghost Story, and maybe that Lamb movie A24 recently put out. That was pretty wild. So, yeah, I hope that intrigues some of you, and everyone else, I will see next time when we talk about American Psycho. See you then.